welcome to the latest episode of 305 Vox Populi here in the town of Miami Lakes. I'm Mayor Manny Cid. We have a great guest today. We have the Executive Director of the Institute for Ethical Leadership at St. Thomas University, Dr. Tony Andenoro. How you doing, Tony?
Oh my gosh, it's so good, so good. I'm doing wonderful, and it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
We appreciate you having on. We're going to thank some of our sponsors real quick. We're powered by Miami Lakes AutoMall. Thank you to Fred Senrino. Our next episode we'll be at the AutoMall. We'll be cool. Maybe we do the, have you seen those interviews, the carpool karaoke?
Yeah, exactly how you should do it.
I think Micah was saying that we should do that. I know they're going to be doing the interview next week, and that might be interesting, a carpool karaoke. So they're located at 16600 Northwest 57th Avenue in Miami Lakes. Their phone number is 305-455-3510. Tony, what do you think about this mural?
I think it's absolutely amazing. I walked in, and the first thing I said is, oh my gosh, there's something more than just people in this room. There's culture, there's connection, there's community. This is awesome.
You got that right. Grisel Gajano, a local school counselor. We know how hard it is to be a school counselor nowadays. The pandemic has seen a rush of folks that need help, right? Especially young people that need help. So I know she's been really, really, really busy and doing a great job. But at night, she always has time to do great works of arts like this. So you can reach her at 786-353-8608. And our film production team, Matter Lakes Broadcasting. Round of applause for these young people. Thank you, guys. Thank you. They do a great job. I know some of the seniors are getting ready for graduation. They already have. When do you guys graduate? When is graduation day? Who's counting, right? June 2nd, right? Yeah. But incredibly exciting. Super proud of you guys. I always get really inspired and motivated when I hear you guys are so excited about college and where you're going and what your future looks like. So not only is it exciting for you guys, but for me, just hearing those stories, I mean, I get pumped up about it. I'm like, that's awesome. Future generations doing so good. So we appreciate you guys. You guys have done an incredible job. And I know you are the envy of Northwest State. Every school wants to have a broadcasting academy now because they've seen what you guys have been capable of doing. And shout out to Enrique Santos, one of our newest sponsors. Enrique was here a couple weeks back. He is the top radio host in the world.
So cool.
Yeah, he's the CEO of iHeartRadio, iHeart Latino. I mean, he does a great job, but he came in and he was like, how do we help you guys out? I mean, he asked that question. He looked around. Harold was here, and they were like, we're going to donate a roadcaster. And check it out. We got a roadcaster now, thanks to Enrique Santos. We appreciate you, Enrique. Thank you, Harold. And to you, Dr. Andenoro, Tony, you know, we always start off with this question. I think you've seen some of this, right?
I have. I'm a big fan.
So for me, it is so important, I know for the kids, is understanding people's why, right? Everybody has a why in their life. So we would love to hear, you know, what's your why in terms of higher education? When did you make that decision of, you know, saying, you know what, the pursuit of knowledge is so important, not only for me, but for the students that I'm going to be helping at Gonzaga, Iowa State, the University of Florida, Texas A&M, and then today bringing your talents to St. Thomas University. Something so important, ethical leadership, right? Mm-hmm. We know we need more of that, not only in Dade County, not only in Florida, but around the world and around our country. But why? What's your why?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. You know, I tend to exist in leadership spaces a lot, and one of the big authors that wrote the book Start With Why is Simon Sinek, and he talks about this golden circle and how you have to ground everything in why. But to deviate from the theoretical and really get down to the practical, I think it goes back to something that actually happened to me at Texas A&M. So I had just defended my dissertation. I had become Dr. Tony, and I was teaching a class pro bono for one of the departments on campus. It was called Leadership and Thinking. And I had an opportunity to go and interview at Bank of America up in Charlotte. I was going to be a performance improvement consultant. And I went up, and after 2 days of interviews, I got on the plane, and I was so excited because I thought it went really well. And sure enough, I got that email that had my offer letter. And I had never seen so many zeros. I mean, for someone who had been a graduate student for so long and not knowing where my next meal was going to be, to then having this amazing opportunity to get this offer letter, I said, wow, I've arrived. This is great. So I decided to think on it for about 48 hours, went back in the classroom the next week, and one of my students came up to me after class. His name was Dion. And Dion said to me, "Hey, Tone, where were you last week?" And I said, "Oh, I had some personal stuff going on, but I bet you didn't miss not having to come to class." And he said, "Well, actually, your class is the only one I go to." And in that moment, I realized it wasn't about the dollars and cents. It wasn't about the opportunity to, go and work for corporate America. It was really about creating a foundation for higher education settings to lead to something better for the students that we serve. And so I decided to go full bore, engage in that, and create a foundation for where I am today, and hopefully that I've helped some students along the way.
So I think that's, when we talk about giving back and making an impact on our society, right? I think the greatest, and Kobe Bryant said this, right? The greatest form of that is being able to inspire others. If you have the ability to inspire another human being, like you just shared, I think that's so incredibly powerful and fulfilling, right? From a professor standpoint. But taking a little step back before that, talk to us about your upbringing. Talk to us about Cleveland, right? So growing up in Cleveland and how that is completely different from the 305. And what's really impressive is that you've grown up in Cleveland, but you've gone to all these different cities and you've acclimated immediately, right? You've created these real relationships everywhere you've gone. And what kind of advice do you have for the youth to be able to do that, to leave Miami and maybe one of these kids goes to Cleveland or they go to Gonzaga or they go to Texas A&M or they go, what advice do you have for them? How do you do that? Because that also takes a lot of talent and effort, knowing where you grew up and everywhere that you've been.
Yeah, that's a great question. Growing up in Cleveland, we didn't have access to a lot. I grew up in a pretty poor area. Had some wonderful parents who tried to create a foundation for me to do things, but really I was the first generation college student. And while my parents valued education, that wasn't something that people did that came from my neighborhood. And I had this opportunity to apply to a bunch of different universities. The one I ended up actually selecting was the University of Toledo, and it was because it was at a significantly reduced rate from the other universities like Duke that I was accepted to. And I said to myself, I can't put my parents in debt. I can't put myself in debt. And so when I went to the University of Toledo, I had to work 3 jobs. I was an RA, I was a lifeguard, I was working at local restaurants, I was doing a variety of different things because I knew that paying for my education was why I was there, because ultimately that would create a foundation for my future. I remember my grandma telling me, Tony, this is the biggest investment that you can ever make in your life. No one can ever take away your education. And that sat with me. And as I moved from place to place, I didn't look at it as, oh my gosh, the anxiety that could happen when I go to these different places, the struggles that I won't know anyone, that I won't have the relationships that I have here, that I won't have the opportunities that I have here. I looked at it as an opportunity to make new friends, meet new people, and do really cool things. And so, the kid who grew up in Cleveland who didn't really know that the world was much more than Northern Ohio, to go to Texas A&M and do my master's and my PhD, to travel around the world on grant projects through the University of Florida and other universities that I've worked on. I mean, that really broadened my eyes. And I said, okay, if this is how I can understand accessibility, how can I create these opportunities for other students? And so my biggest advice to students would be, don't be afraid to take the leap, because what you might find is everything you've ever hoped for. And that creates the foundation for them to just do amazing things. So they got to go for it.
That is very, very true. You got to go for it. 100% right. It's part of your leadership skills, I think, it came from your time, and a lot of people don't know this, your time as a high-level volleyball coach, right?
Yeah.
And I saw that in action. I was in one of your meetings. Ariel joined, and we were fortunate to be invited to one of your leadership meetings, and just sitting in there. How has your experience as a volleyball coach, right, at those high levels helped you today? Or I saw it because I love sports. I coach basketball. But how has that helped you in your path in higher education, where we know higher education is this type of world where silos exist, right? Where everybody's like, this is my cubicle, this is my space. I don't want to. And we know that in sports, that's not the truth. You need a team. Yep. The stronger the team, the closer the bond, the better it is for everybody, and that's how you win championships. But I think the same thing that you're trying to do within your team is eliminate those silos, have that community. And I saw that. But how has your experience as a coach helped you today?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. So I think about some of the things that made our teams successful. You know, we would strategically have glue people that would hold the teams together. We'd have these all-stars that could absolutely dominate the court. And then we had these other role players that really fit the needs that we had. And so, you know, it was able to assess where our needs were as a team and then actually produce talent, put it on the floor. And I had some great motivational speeches and stuff like that. But all that stuff was secondary to the cultures that we tried to create. And so the culture of excellence that we tried to create was inevitably tied to our individual relationships. And so I wasn't coaching a team, I was coaching individual players. And I think it was probably most eye-opening for me when I moved from coaching women to coaching men. And I tried to apply the same things that I learned in coaching women to coaching guys. And the first thing that I noticed was that women need to bond to battle, and men need to battle to bond. But both end in the culture and the collective idea that every single person has to pull their weight to get us to the goal that we're trying to accomplish. And so when I approach faculty members, I say, what are these intangibles that they need to have? You know, I look for positivity, I look for discontent for mediocrity, and honestly, I look for hardiness through adversity. Because if they've been resilient, it means that they're going to be able to deal with, you know, occasional long nights and really some stressors that go along with the job. But that positivity and that discontent for mediocrity and their willingness to engage in the culture, that's the foundation of something powerful. So then I can learn who they are, and we can create a foundation for how we can walk with each other on the journey to greatness versus me dragging them up the mountain or me saying good luck and cutting them loose, because it's the reciprocity. It's together.
No, and you're right. And that walking with each other takes some empathy, right? And I think from a leadership standpoint, I think empathy is one of the values that we have to embrace. One of those intangibles that sometimes leaders don't look into. So we recently, a lot of folks saw it online. We recently went to Peru. You, myself, the Matter Lakes Broadcasting folks, Joseph. The Suarez Museum of Natural History. I mean, just a great contingency that went together. But one of the moments that stuck out to me was visited one of the oldest universities in South America, and I remember walking in there, and you know, this gentleman was very serious. This is a very serious dude that we met with. I think one of the deans or one of the presidents from the university. This was the one in Cusco. Yeah, and this guy. Tony, we're speaking, and he's just like super serious. Like he's just not even moving from his seat, just looking around. He's like, this is a Sunday, you know, a Good Friday. What am I doing? I got to get out of here.
I was worried about it.
Yeah, I was really, and I'm looking around. I was like, this is not going to go well. But when you started to speak, it wasn't about you. It was, you started to speak about him and their institution and having that empathy, right? Researching, knowing that the folks that you're going to deal with, regardless if it is in higher education, if you're going to go in any different field, you got to understand, you know, that other people need to feel valued. So the moment that you started talking about the similarities between St. Thomas and his institution and talking about those bonds and knowing the history of his institution, he immediately changed and he started smirking. He sat back. He went from sitting up real serious to just sitting back, and he just put a smile on his face. He started, you know, shaking his head. And that changed everything. That little bit of empathy, those 2 or 3 minutes of empathy, changed the entire trajectory of that encounter at that university. Why is empathy so important to leadership, ethical leadership, and to the way that you approach things? And why is it important for the youth to embrace empathy? Because sometimes it seems like we don't have enough of that in our. If we had more of that, I think the majority of our problems in our society would dissipate. But I think empathy is incredibly powerful. But why is it important?
Yeah, I always say we should listen to so we can learn from and then walk with. And I think everything in our world comes down to relationships, anything of value. And so when I was going into that context, I wanted to establish a relationship with the university because it's the relationship that's going to contribute to the groundbreaking research that we're going to do together that's ultimately going to create value for their students, value for our students, and then value for the collective society and communities that we work with. And so it starts with the relationship. So I say, how can I form a connection, something that is inherently valuable to him? How can I value that? When I value that, I begin to establish that connection, and I can build that relationship. All that is grounded in empathy. If we can't understand, if we don't take the time to take a step back and yield the floor to allow someone else to speak, we have no chance to understand what they're going through. And that's the foundation of empathy. And so empathy is not only important, it's absolutely essential because it helps us to address the biggest challenge that we face as a global community, which is apathy. I mean, people struggle to care. But if you find that point of connection, oh my gosh, inevitably you can change the world.
That is very true. And talking about empathy and eliminating apathy, but walking through someone's shoes and seeing the world through their eyes, how describe to everybody watching, so how do we see through Dr. Tony Andenoro's eyes and walk in his shoes during that trip in Peru? Like, walk us through that. I mean, how did you, from the moment you got on a plane at MIA to the moment we arrived back in MIA, just that entire week, walk us through that. What did you see? What did you feel? What were the important moments? I mean, share with the folks, because I know more and more people every day ask me about that. So I share from my perspective, which might be completely different than yours, but what's your perspective, and how did those 7 days, what did it mean to you?
Yeah, it was an exercise in trust and resilience that made me realize how much work there actually is to be done. So let's start with the trust part of it. We have a relationship. I talked about it before. Everything's grounded in relationships. We have a relationship. You have a relationship with these students who are producing this podcast. But we also have those amazing relationships with the other people that create an integrated experience that can hopefully help the people of Peru. So I need to trust that you've put together a wonderful team. You need to trust that the people that I bring on create a wonderful team. And when we do that, it helps us to reduce our barriers to the conversation. And then it leads to those connections that can really help us to figure out how we can work authentically together. So getting on the plane alone, I mean, just all the luggage that some people were bringing, I got one carry-on and I'm like, I'm ready to go for 2 weeks, whatever you need. And people are like, what? You only packed one carry-on? Like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, hey, whatever, we can recycle clothes if we have to, but who knows?
By the way, you had that special spray that you spray on anything. Yes. And it's like, it was dry cleaned. So what is that called, by the way?
So our new sponsor is going to be Downy because they have this wrinkle releaser.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that, Albert? We got a new sponsor on here.
Product placement there. Okay, very intentional what we're doing here. No, but it was this wonderful opportunity to see people travel. And when you travel with somebody, you really get to know who they are as an individual. And so that right there started to create the foundation for a great trip. And so that built the trust. An exercise in resilience, because we were out the door by 8 a.m. and we were getting home at 10, 11 o'clock at night every single day. But I have this adage that I say over and over again in my study abroad groups that I take to different countries around the world. They sometimes they hate me for it, but I say, sleep in the States. We have such a finite amount of time in these developing contexts. And if we don't maximize every single minute, it's a missed opportunity. And we just don't want to do that. And so I think an exercise in resilience was probably the second piece. The third piece is there's a lot of work to do. As I take a step back and after we talk to the different universities that we established partner agreements with, and we listen to the different municipalities and we talk to the people within those communities, inevitably they need a lot of support. Whether that support be financial, whether that support be from a capacity development perspective through education, access to telehealth, whatever it might be, they need resources and they need to be intentional about how we create opportunities for their sustainability. So that makes me think, what grants can I go after? How can I work with our team that went down there, but also the people down there to do some really cool multi-institutional municipality type grants. So I think there's opportunities for a boundless amount of work. I think one of the things that as we went from place to place, I was kind of taken back by was the amount of respect that they had for us and how they wanted to welcome us into their culture. And they did that through the medals, through the stoles, through the proclamations, all the different things that they provided to us. And I thought about it. I said, should I wear my poncho today? Should I, bring my donkey that the one person gave me? Should I wear my medals? And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And the reason why I'm not going to do that is because I want to remind myself of why we're actually there. So in Morris, little tiny town, that one night when we were getting ready to leave and we were so tired, we had just visited the salt mines. We went to Morris, and they gave us this outpouring of support and love that welcomed us into their community. And I was really glad that we went. And so you had introduced me to that 12-year-old girl. I think her name was Maria. And Maria, her lifelong dream is to come to the United States and have a higher education experience. And you said, what do you think? Can we create something? And in that moment, I looked in her eyes, and they were tears of joy because there was a possibility that she could explore something that she never thought she'd have accessibility to. And so we're going to work. We're trying to figure out how to make that happen. And of course, there's a lot of different things that are going to come into play there. But if we can create the foundation for her to do something powerful, then she can go back to her community and create something powerful for so many others. And once one person has access, other people say, maybe I can have that same accessibility. But what touched me most was as we were getting in our cars that night after we were leaving, she ran up to me and she gave me this little bag that she made. And on the inside is some salt from the Incan mines that are, there in Morris. And she didn't have to do that. But this is a constant reminder, and it sits on my desk every single day, about how I have to be worth my salt. She gave me that, and that means every single day I have to be earning my paycheck. I have to be earning her support by doing the work that needs to be done for our world. And so it's a powerful motivator, and that was what probably hit me hardest on that entire trip.
No, that's incredibly powerful, and I'll never forget that because we weren't supposed to go to Maras.
No, we weren't.
And I remember how it all went down. We were like, where are we going? What's going on? And then once we were there, you're right. It was a special moment because you realize how fortunate we are to be born where we were born. I mean, just that reality. They don't have running water. They only have running water 3 times a day, 3 hours out of the day.
3 hours out of the day.
They can only water their crops, once a month. So imagine that. You can only grow your crops during the rainy season. So, I mean, you start realizing that. But at the end of the day, and you're right, just that little bit of motivation, inspiration, I mean, that's what a human being always looks for, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that is very powerful. And having that on your desk, I think it's a great motivator, that entire conversation. I know that the interesting part is that they want us to go back at some point as a follow-up to Maras and different part. And I'd love to do that maybe a year or 2 years from now, maybe a year from now. But yeah, it was definitely an amazing trip.
Yeah, it's this great reminder. There's a recent study done that took all the countries in the world and ranked them on an individualism collectivism scale. And as you might guess, the United States was number 1, leaps and bounds above everyone else from an individualistic standpoint. And I think that's a social commentary on our world, that we've forgotten that we belong to each other. And so in that moment where I'm standing there with that little girl, where you and I travel down to Peru and have these amazing experiences where we try desperately to create value with the people of Peru, the soul feels its worth.
Yep.
And we can begin to belong to each other again.
No, you got that right. I'm looking forward to the documentary that Albert and Lou and
it's
the entire team is working on. I think Joseph's working on getting one of the theaters, the movie theater right down the street, to play one of the nights so we can all go. So it'll be cool stuff. Looking forward to that, I think, in August. I'm
inviting everyone.
100%.
Everyone.
But we got to make sure Albert brings some cuy, some guinea pig. The guinea pig that we ate, we did eat guinea pig in Peru, and it was phenomenal. So
it was just, yes, welcomed us into our culture, and so we had to abide by their cultural ideas.
It was good
Yes.
stuff. So one of the things that we do different on this podcast is that our students get to ask you
awesome.
questions. What do you guys got for Dr. Andenoro today?
Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Oh my gosh. I feel like that's an interview question. Where do I see myself in 10 years? So I was listening to this great interview the other day with Jean Baptiste, the guy who won like 10 Grammys or whatever it was. The last one, he was integral in making the movie Soul and all the music. He's this, prolific New Orleans musician. And he said, I love to play in the moment. And I think so often we're focused on the future, and we're so focused on the future that the present passes us by. And so my hope is to, in 10 years, continue the pathway that creates value for the people that I serve in our world. And whether that means I'm at St. Thomas as the executive director for the Institute for Ethical Leadership, or it means that I'm the president of another university somewhere else, as long as I'm continuing on the trajectory of service that reminds me that the people and the relationships are priority number one, I think I'm going to be in a good place and I'm going to be happy.
That's a good answer, Micah. I think he was asking you that because he wanted to make sure you're going to be his professor for his PhD program a couple of years from now.
Yeah, we're in. I already got him registered, so it's weird, but he's in.
We'll make it happen. What other questions you all got for Dr. Andenoro?
All right, so what is the biggest change you think you made in someone?
In Peru or just in general?
Just in general.
I think inevitably we move in this fast-paced world, and people, especially coming out of COVID, people feel as though they don't have connections. And I think the biggest difference that I can make is an everyday proposition for me, that I can help people feel valued in that moment. And so one of the biggest changes that I think I've made in other people's life started with the biggest change that I made in my life. I used to be absolutely connected to my calendar and my to-do list, and that was, it was like my goal to just knock everything off and get done for the day. And what that meant was I was multitasking, and you can't multitask people. And so I made a concerted effort to start investing in a meaningful way in the one-on-one relationships. And when I'm present with that person, I'm fully 100% present. And inevitably what that does is it makes the person feel valued and they want to stay. It indicates to them that there is longevity for the relationship because they are someone of substance. And if I can help them to feel that way, that creates the change that can help them to do amazing things for the world. And maybe even they'll pay that forward and do the same thing for another person. And so I think that's probably the biggest change that I've made for others, and that inevitably started with a change in myself.
I wanted to ask you, what made you switch from coaching to becoming like the director of a whole institution?
Yeah, that's a fun question. So I loved coaching. It is exhausting. I mean, the travel, the never knowing exactly what meal you're going to eat when you're on the road, and inevitably I was doing the coaching thing as the secondary pursuit to my pursuit of higher education, and I was in a relationship at the time, and my previous wife actually gave me an ultimatum and said, it's either me or it's coaching. And so I said, of course, I want to be invested in that relationship. And so I quit coaching in that moment. But in that moment, what it actually helped me to do is understand so many other things in my life that I needed to recognize that in relationships, especially the profound ones, like the amazing relationship that I have now with my wife, it has to be give and take. It can't be 100% service, because then you're not filling your emotional bucket. And so, that relationship back in the day that actually caused me to quit coaching, I wished her all the best, but it did not last. But moving forward, it helped me to learn so much about what I can value and how I can fill my emotional bucket so I can serve others with the intensity that they deserve. And so, probably not a great answer that somebody made me quit coaching. But I will always cherish my teammates. I will always cherish the people I coached. And it's so fun because I still get invited to go to alumni weekends at Texas A&M. I still get invited to weddings for my former players and stuff like that. And it's so fun to watch them grow up and have these amazing contributions to the world. And hopefully I played some tiny piece of that. So I don't lament that it's gone. I celebrate that it happened.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So one of the other things, thank you guys for those questions.
Yeah, they were awesome. Thank you.
One of the things that we do as well is something they added at the beginning of when we first started the program, is that they flip the script. So you get to ask me any questions you may have. So
I would guess that oftentimes you get asked, what's your why?
Yep.
But I think there's a deeper thing. Inevitably, my why is informed by my who. And so I would ask you, what's your who?
Wait, I need you to elaborate. I think we need him to elaborate on that a little bit more,
Sure.
right?
Absolutely. So, I talked about how relationships are so significant. And so you have your amazing family. You also have all the amazing people that work with you here at the city. You have the students that you interact with on a daily basis. If you had to say, who's the foundation that keeps you grounded, keeps you on the path that really helps you to be you, who would that be?
Oh, that's Melissa, without a doubt, to be honest. That's my wife. Like, without her, I mean, I run, and it goes back. When you mention Katie and your relationship and how you talk every day, and, we talk about this all the time, how important it is to have that. It's a team, right? So Melissa, every day we sit down, we're with the kids, put them to sleep, but we have our conversations every day about what happened that day, advice, what happened to her, what happened to me, and it goes back and forth. So she keeps me on that path every single day. The who that inspired me to be who I am, started with my grandmother, my mom, my dad. Our family's very, very small, but starting with my grandmother's story, when she got a knock on her door in 1959, right, when the communist thugs took over Cuba, she got a knock on her door, and they said, you know what, the room that you own upstairs, it's no longer yours. They're no longer paying rent. The apartment that you have in the back, it's no longer yours, and your house is no longer yours. She's like, what are you talking about? That we built this with our own hands? No, it all belongs to the revolution. And I remember her sharing that story with me with tears in her eyes, and then sharing the story of getting notice that my mom at 13, 14 years old, they told her, look, we're taking your daughter away for 6 months. She needs to go what they called La Escuela de Campo, which was a forced labor camp for kids. My mom at 14 years old was cutting sugarcane, was picking tobacco leaves. So, by the way, that's why I don't drink Cuban rum. Neither do I smoke Cuban cigars. So when people offer me like a Cuban cigar, I just look at them. I'm like, look, and I tell them that story. I was like, my mom was one of those kids that was forced into that camp to do that. And then just hearing their story that, they had the opportunity to leave. They left. They went to Spain for 3 years, not knowing anybody, stayed in Spain for 3 years. They weren't allowed to work. It was under the Franco regime. But at least they had the opportunity to leave, came here to the United States. The first day that they arrived, plane lands, get here. First day that they arrived. They didn't ask for nothing for free. They didn't ask for... They immediately started walking in East Hialeah to the warehouse. Like, do you guys need somebody to work? Yeah. Same day they got here, they started working. My mom, at 17 years old, started working as well. Walked into one of those warehouses, started working right off the bat. If they finished at 4:00 and they walked down the street, there was another warehouse that needed some fabric made. They went and they got that job. At the same time, my mom was going to night school at Hialeah High to learn English and get her GED, because she was like, look, we know in America that education is the greatest equalizer. And she did that while my grandmother kept working. My mom was working that entire time, but my grandmother worked 2 jobs. But on top of that, my mom ended up going to St. Biscayne College, right? Which now St. Thomas University, got her bachelor's in education. It was tough because she didn't know the language, but she was learning English at the same time, and then got her master's in psychology from St. Thomas University, and that changed the entire path for our family. And the same thing with my dad. My dad had to leave Cuba. He had to go to Costa Rica. And when he came here to the United States, didn't have anything. His dad, my grandfather had passed away. So he was by himself, living in a walk-in closet in Little Havana, worked really hard at a community mental health center, whatever they needed him to do, clean the floors, and moved all the way up to the crisis director, So those are my who's, right? It's all 4 of those: my grandmother, my mom, my dad, and Melissa. To be honest with you, they're every single one of them. Even though my grandmother and my dad are no longer here, they continue guiding me down that path.
Well, and I hope that the people who are listening to this say to themselves, oh my gosh, that's so important, because it comes down to authentically who each one of those people are and how much they're grounded in the idea that the work that they do today is directly proportional to the benefits they will reap tomorrow. That's so powerful. And I would hope that everybody approaches the world that way.
Yep.
Gosh, that's good.
Got anything else for me before we do some final inspirational thoughts for the youth? Anything else you got? Or
I don't know. Are we good on time?
I think we got a couple minutes. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Got maybe one more question.
Okay. One more question. Okay. So I ask about your who. Inevitably, one of the things that people are baffled about when they look at you is how you're able to get to everything. But you don't just get to everything. You get to everything with quality. So how do you maintain that quality amongst the tremendous quantity that you face on a daily basis?
You got to say no. There are things. I have a rule in my office, and I tell Joe all the time, look, if I get invited to something that doesn't move the needle for my residents, right, doesn't help my residents in any way, even though it might be a cool event or something, I don't go, right? Yeah. And by moving the needle, there's many ways, right? It's increasing my knowledge base, my leadership capacity, is finding a new a grant opportunity or something new that the Florida League of Cities is working on, something that can help but everything else, if there's a cocktail hour somewhere or this and that and networking, I have to say no, because if I say yes to all those things, the quality starts to diminish. Even though the quantity grows, and maybe politically, it might be better to be seen at all these things. Yeah. The reality is you can't have genuine connections or go. Like today, I have a ribbon cutting at 5:30. I'm not going to miss that. That is somebody who's investing their hard-earned dollars into my community, who believes in our town, who lives in this town and now moved their business here. There's no chance. Even though it might not be these glamorous events that you have downtown or another part, but that means the world to that person. So that to me is more important than anything else. But yeah, that's what I do, and maybe it hurts me politically that I don't go to all these events or networking events. But the reality is, the right thing that I feel is people like that, you have to honor them, and they got to feel, like you said, every human being wants to feel valued. Yeah. And just my presence alone and speaking and welcoming somebody to our community, I know that means the world to some folks.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So appreciate the question. But yeah, Joseph does a great job of that, because I get invited to, you could look at what we get every single day getting invited.
I can only imagine.
But some final words of inspiration, motivation for the youth, for the future generation. I think we talked earlier today how we're starting to see a shift in generations in our country, right? Baby boomers controlled everything for 30 years, right? Baby boomers because they were the largest generation, right? So now you're starting to see that next millennials really step up, and you're starting to see that baton being passed. What advice do you have for that youth that's going to be that next generation, where that baton of leadership, ethical leadership, is going to be passed to them very, very soon?
Yeah, I see a lot of youth saying to themselves, or saying to others, heck, saying to me, I can't do that. The system doesn't allow me. I'm not set up for success there. I don't know that particular thing. And what I would say to those those students, what I would say to that next generation is you are powerful beyond measure. You just have to harness that power. And so your power is the people that surround you, but the power is also, I'll go back to the work ethic thing again. It's what you put in. If you don't have quit in you, there's never an I can't. There's only an I will. And that sets the foundation for you to do everything and anything that you can possibly do. Not just to have a great family situation and be able to buy the things that you want, but to create real value for your world and the people that you love, your extended family. And I think that's what we all want to do, right? We want to support the people that support us. And so, powerful beyond your wildest measure. And so, own that and put that into practice every single day of your life.
That is very powerful. Well, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you sharing some of the knowledge, some of those thoughts, and the real reality. Thank you for the job that you do, because ethical leadership, it's what's going to sustain our institutions long term. So thank you.
No, and I really appreciate the opportunity. I get pretty geeked out about this stuff. I really do think ethical leadership is how we're going to save our world. But to have an opportunity to come on and talk about that a little bit, and anytime I get a chance to talk to you, of course I'm in. So thank you.
I appreciate that, Tony. And there you have it, Dr. Tony Andenoro, the Executive Director of the Institute for Ethical Leadership at St. Thomas University. Tune in next Wednesday on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.